You probably did. Did have bipartisan support.
So, Senator, we have some testimony from like Iowa Corn and others that will have.
Let's see. This is kind of the order of business for today. I'll have an opening statement. Senator Durbin will have an opening statement. Then we have the chairman of the and ranking member of the subcommittees to make an opening statement. That's the antitrust subcommittee. And then we'll introduce and swear in the witnesses and take the testimony. Today, the Judiciary Committee turns its attention to a problem Iowa farmers talk to me about at the kitchen table and at the local co-op. This time of the year, farmers are buying the basics they need to plant and harvest a crop. These farmers don't feel like they have a real choice, let alone a fair price. America's farmers are the most productive in the world. They take the risk, put in the work, and feed the United States and much of the world, but they also operate on thin profit margins if they have a profit. If input costs go up or switching suppliers is too hard, that pinch is felt by every farmer, family, and consumer in the world. Farmers across the country are shouldering significant higher input costs, particularly for seed and fertilizer. According to the USDA's agricultural price reports, the price indexes farmers pay for these categories were notably higher in January 2025 than at the start of 2021. This was obviously due in part to the record high inflation that took place during the last 4 years. Rising input prices squeeze already thin margins, especially when combined with volatile commodity markets, higher borrowing costs, and weather risk. Today's hearing will examine the drivers behind these trends, energy markets that influence nitrogen production, global supply disruptions, logistic bottlenecks, and market concentration. This hearing will evaluate practical steps that increase transparency and competition so processors and producers can remain viable and resilient. One such step would be to pass my legislation, the Fertilizer Research Act. The bill would require the Department of Agriculture to do a comprehensive study on fertilizer industry to shed light on the reason farmers are paying so much for fertilizer. The department would be required to give recommendations on further regular reporting to the public. This hearing is focused on competition issues. However, there is something that the Trump administration can do right now to help ease the burden for farmers, lowering the countervailing duties on phosphate from Morocco. In 2024, the Biden administration increased the duties on Moroccan phosphate to 18%. The Biden phosphate duties have only hurt farmers by boxing out access to this important market on an essential input with no substitute. I'm calling on the Trump administration to help American farmers and get rid of that phosphate duty. Over the last 20 years, a few big companies have bought up many of the smaller seed and chemical businesses. Those same companies now sell not just the seeds, but also the pesticides and digital farming tools that tell farmers what to plant and when. Because all these products and data systems are tied together, it's hard for farmers to switch to a different brand. Their data and recommendations are locked in to one company's system. On the fertilizer side, global energy and trade shocks hit prices fast. Regional markets, those prices can be slow to fall. On top of that are the contracts and dealer practices like loyalty rebates, most favored clauses, and early order calendars that can lock in a farm or a local retailer even when there's better options on paper. Now, nobody here wants to punish innovation. We want better yields, healthier soils, quality products, and we've been vastly improving in that area for the last 40 years. But we also want competition that's fair, transparent, and local competition that a farmer can actually express when he or she sits down to make a purchase. Competition law is about making sure the rules don't give a few players the power to decide what everyone else pays and which choices are even available. This hearing focuses on problems and workable solutions. First, transparency. Farmers deserve to know the effective price that they're paying, including how rebates and clawbacks really work and whether wholesale fertilizer declines are being passed through in a timely way. Second, portability. Farmers ought to control their own data and move it quickly, completely, and affordably so they can seek independent agronomic advice without fear of losing their history. Third, fair dealing. Contracts and dealer programs shouldn't operate as a de facto exclusive arrangement in rural counties where there might only be one or two full-service outlets. And fourth, accountability. When mergers don't deliver what was promised on paper, agencies should look back and fix it. I represent Iowa, so I'm thinking about anhydrous ammonia logistics, early season timing, and the reality that a lost multi-line dealer can mean a long drive and fewer options. But these issues cross state lines, and the principles are the same whether you farm in Iowa, Illinois, or anywhere else. More sunlight, more choice, less fine print, level playing fields. I appreciate Senator Durbin's partnership in setting this constructive bipartisan tone today. We'll hear from farmers, producers, and industry experts. My goal is pretty simple. Identify practical steps, legislative and regulatory, that respect innovation and property rights, but restore real on-the-ground competition. We're also joined today by Gail Slater, the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust at the Department of Justice. Her presence is a strong showing of good faith and continued collaboration on ag antitrust issues that I hope to have with her and have had already. When farmers win fair choices at fair prices, world's communities win, consumers win, and American food security wins. I look forward to the discussion and now turn to Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. We are of different political faith, but we are friends, and we have many issues in common, particularly as they relate to agriculture. I concede, reluctantly, but concede that Iowa is the #1 producer of corn among states, and add quickly, Illinois is first in soybeans. We have one category where I think we are comfortably ahead of Iowa, and I want to note it this week, and that's in the area of pumpkins. So we are proud of that fact. I thank you for this hearing. I think we need to take a look at the overall state of the farm economy as we address this particular challenge today. More than 50 years ago in 1973, the U.S. economy was in turmoil. Inflation and the cost of living were up, food prices were high, and American families were angry. At the same time, there was a global shortage of livestock feed, causing the price of soybeans to spike. President Nixon, in an effort to stem inflation, stopped all U.S. soybean exports, including those headed to Japan, then our biggest customer. This interruption lasted about 3 months, but for Japan, it was the last straw. The Japanese wanted a more reliable soybean supplier, so they found a handful of small soybean farms in Brazil and started investing. Today, Brazil is the second largest soybean producer in the world and the biggest competitor to Illinois soybean farmers. All it took was one presidential misstep and 3 months of trade uncertainty. 3 months. Sadly, President Trump is not a student of history. His tariffs on China, even as they change from one week to the next, are bad news for Illinois farmers and good news for Brazilian farmers, who've seen their sales of soybeans to China increase by $2 billion this year. Tariffs are also good news for Argentina, which has sold $708 million more in soybeans to China this year. Yet President Trump is propping up Argentina's government with a $40 billion lifeline when American farmers are struggling to stay in business. The president is in Asia for trade discussions with China. I hope that they will be positive. But China is now investing heavily in South American farming, even building megaports there to manage massive shipments of soybeans, corn, and sugar. It is a replay of what we saw with Japan and Brazil in the 1970s. And China is playing the long game at the expense of American farmers. Illinois farmers are concerned about the increasing cost of doing business, especially the cost of seed, fertilizer, and equipment. One problem is that there are just a few big companies in these sectors where market concentration reduces competition. The committee has examined these dynamics in other parts of the food industry, such as meat packing and groceries. It's a complex issue, which is why I joined Chairman Grassley back in April to question why the Department of Justice planned to close its Chicago field office that specializes in agriculture antitrust issues. The administration has not provided a response. Farmers need policy certainty from Washington, but these past 10 months, that's not what we've given them. The chairman and I co-sponsor a bill to allow for year-round E15 ethanol sales. It almost passed Congress until Donald Trump and Elon Musk stopped it and opposed the bill. Farmers also face severe workforce shortages. 70% of farm workers in the United States are foreign-born, but the way this administration targeted immigrant farm workers is another sign of how this administration values farmers. USDA has forced out more than 15,000 employees since January, and farmers are seeing widespread delay in services as a result. My farmers, all farmers, need help, but no amount of financial relief can replace lost markets, especially if relief payments simply go from farmers straight to the handful of seed, fertilizer, and equipment companies. Big companies say their size helps them compete and survive while providing consumers with a consistent, reliable product. Farmers disagree. Saying feed, seed, and fertilizer are not affordable come with strict contracts and requirements that prevent farmers from exploring the alternatives, pressure tactics that keep farmers trapped as customers, and zero transparency on how personal farming data gets collected and sent to who knows where for who knows what. This month, the Nobel Prize for Economics was awarded to 3 economists who believe that economic growth happens when conditions exist that allow new innovation and technology to rise up to replace old ones. Today's witnesses will report on whether that is actually happening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I call on Senator Lee, chairman of the subcommittee, and Senator Booker, the ranking member, I think we all saw the TV reports over the weekend that Secretary Bassett feels that he's making progress with the Chinese counterparts. And I suppose to some extent that comes from the fact that the president has used tariffs as a carrot and stick to make progress in this area. But we hope that when President Trump gets done with his meeting with President Xi this weekend, that we have good reports on soybeans, going into or to China. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, and Ranking Member Durbin for holding this important hearing on competition in American agriculture. Agriculture is, of course, one of our greatest strengths as a country. Our farmers work hard to produce nutritious food, not just for families here at home, but to feed hungry people around the world. And yet today, farmers are facing mounting pressure from market consolidation that's been squeezing them from both sides, creating a bottleneck. The companies that farmers buy from keep raising prices on some of the essential supplies they have to have in order to produce their commodities. At the same time, the buyers that farmers try to sell to continue to negotiate down, and they're negotiating down what they'll pay for crops and for livestock. Farmers are caught in the middle, very often watching their margins shrink year after year. Market consolidation has, of course, raised some additional concerns. Just 2 companies now control about 90% of corn seed genetics. 4 firms produce roughly 75% of the nitrogen fertilizer used in this country. In cattle, 4 meat packers handle about 85% of fed cattle slaughter capacity in America. Consolidation's impacts are felt not just on the farm, but all the way to the grocery store, where consumers face fewer choices and fairly consistently higher prices at the same time. In addition to consolidation, sometimes regulations add to the problem, even when this is unintended, as it sometimes is. Federal regulations often impose compliance costs that small operators simply can't shoulder. What often may start as safety measures can become barriers that keep new competitors out of the market altogether. They serve as a sort of moat, an anti-competitive moat around the industry. And they can exclude people from becoming competitors who might otherwise reach that status. Now, this is why I've been an original co-sponsor of the Processing Revival and Intrastate Meat Market Exemption Act, also known as the PRIME Act. This bill takes a common sense approach. It would let states set their own inspection standards for meat that's processed and sold entirely within a single state's boundaries. The Constitution, properly understood, based on its text and based on its original public meaning at the time of its adoption, simply does not support the proposition that federal regulatory authority should extend to commerce as to products that never cross state lines to begin with. By removing this onerous federal regulatory footprint and allowing states to play their role where it's appropriate for states to play, we could help small processors compete far more effectively. More processors would mean farmers would have more options as to where they could sell their products, which would strengthen local economies and build resilient food systems. We also need strong enforcement efforts to address some of our competition issues. President Trump's Agricultural Competition Task Force is a joint effort between the U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's an effort that brings together DOJ's enforcement authority and USDA's deep knowledge of agricultural markets. It's a comprehensive approach designed to root out anti-competitive behavior. The task force is tackling these problems head-on. DOJ is investigating price-fixing schemes and allegations of collusion. They're taking a fresh look at past mergers to see how they may have impacted the state of competition. They're examining whether dominant firms are sharing information in ways that let them illegally coordinate their actions. The task force is also going after predatory pricing, where dominant corporations deliberately sell at prices below cost to drive smaller rivals out of business so that they can then seize a dominant position. And, of course, addressing patent abuses that stifle innovation and keep new competitors locked out. The task force also recognizes that we need to address the structural problems that created these issues in the first place. Take the cost squeeze farmers face every planting season. When essential inputs such as seed and fertilizer become more expensive, farmers profit margins inevitably shrink. These costs stay high because of limited competition. When farmers face these market conditions, we're not just looking at an agricultural problem. We're looking at a broader threat that reaches across the economy and into our nation's food security, something that we pay a lot of attention to in this town. Competitive markets are essential infrastructure, you might say, within our economy. When competition works, innovation flourishes because new ideas can break through, because they have every incentive to do so. Consumers benefit from better products at fairer prices. Rural communities prosper because farmers can earn a decent living. But when competition breaks down, we tend to see the opposite of that. Costs climb while innovation stalls. Farmers and ranchers look at those shrinking markets and wonder if the next generation will have any future in farming at all. And we can't let that happen. Agricultural markets are not exempt from the rule of law, certainly not exempt from our antitrust statutes. Farmers, ranchers, and American consumers deserve markets where success comes from innovation, efficiency, and hard work, not from consolidation or collusion. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and doing all this with an eye toward keeping American agriculture strong for generations to come. In order to do that, we all understand that we need robust competition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm grateful for that, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for you and the ranking member for organizing what I think is a vitally important hearing. I want to thank Senator Mike Lee. He and I have a whole bunch of overlap, a wide swath of agreement of the urgency of these issues and a lot of common ideas about what we need to do about them. I want to just start by saying something that doesn't really need to be said because it's happening all over this country, but American farmers are in crisis. Farms in New Jersey and across our country are facing unprecedented conditions, and we're seeing a loss of American family farmers in a way that could be described as an extinction-level event. These are incredible Americans who scratch from the soil the food that feeds our families and makes us competitive globally. But year after year, they have seen the cost of seed, fertilizer, fuel, and land go up while the prices for their crops barely budge. And we're going to hear testimony today about the serious financial challenges facing our soybean farmers, really created by the Trump administration's chaotic trade policies. And I want folks to hear that because, again, I've gone across this country in multiple states and met with soybean farmers and seen their true fealty to this nation and their mission. But while soybean farmers are struggling unnecessarily so, we need to also remember that many other farmers, including farmers growing fruits and vegetables, are also struggling and in need of assistance from Congress. They need action from this body. They need not us to only rightfully point out the problems, but come up with solutions. Because our food system today suffers from, as my colleague Mike Lee was saying, hyper-concentration. A handful of mega corporations now dominate every step of the supply chain, and that begins with seeds. The seed market, which used to include hundreds of small, regionally based seed companies, is now controlled by just a few powerful global corporations: Bayer, Corteva, Signeta. Through mergers and acquisitions and aggressive patent practices, these firms have driven out nearly all the smaller competitors. As a result, these three companies can dictate what seeds are available, what traits they carry, and ultimately what crops farmers grow. Seeds aren't just another input. They are unique because they are living organisms, the foundation of our food system, which used to be controlled and dictated by great Americans, individual farmers who know their soil, who are stewards of the land. But now you have to go have good seeds to grow, but you have to have good seeds to grow, and they know that. For thousands of years, these stewards of our lands, these great Americans, saved seeds from one harvest to the next and fed America. But in recent decades, this fundamental right of farmers to save seeds has literally been stolen from them by corporate greed. Monsanto, now Bayer, locked up seeds with sweeping utility patents and sued our American farmers for doing what they had always done, saving and replanting the progeny of seeds that they planted, that their parents planted, that their grandparents planted. Since the 1990s, companies have engineered genetically modified seeds with desirable traits like herbicide tolerance or insect resistance. These patented seeds are bundled with their own pesticides by corporations, so farmers are forced to buy the whole package. This traps farmers in an expensive system they may not want or even need. Last November, I sent a letter to the EPA urging them to deny the pending reapproval for the pesticide dicamba. Dicamba is notorious for drifting and damaging neighboring farms with crops that aren't engineered to withstand it. This creates an inescapable lose-lose for our American farmers. Either buy dicamba-resistant seeds or risk your crops being destroyed by pesticide drift. It forces farmers into seed pesticide bundles and expands corporate control. That's not real choice. That's not a free market. It's coercion through chemistry. Choice is disappearing across our farm economy. It is anti-free market. And our public research institutions, who have the tools to innovate, are steered to serve Bayer and Corteva's interests. These corporations not only control research funding, but distribution, blocking independent seeds from reaching the market. The result? Fewer varieties, weaker resilience, and lost opportunities to adapt to a rapidly changing climate. This is corporate capture of the very first link in our food chain. And when you control the seed, you have unjust control over farmers, and ultimately you control the food. We are America, the home of the brave and the land of the free, but freedom is being stolen by this corporate concentration. And it's not just farmers that are hurting because of this broken, corrupt system. Consumers also pay the price. We must do better. We must restore competition and fairness in this system because I know American farmers. Give them a fair playing field and they can compete with the world. And when our farmers compete, all of America wins. So this means reinforcing our antitrust laws and placing a moratorium on any new big ag mergers. It means protecting farmers' rights to save seeds and choose inputs based on need. It means continuing the ban on dicamba and investing in public research that serves the public interest, public research that serves farmers and not corporations. This is a moment of urgency. If we do not act now, we will reach a point where so many farmers are driven off the land that they have been on for generation after generation. Land their grandfathers and great-grandfathers and mothers cleared with their own bare hands. What's happening in America is dire. Congress must not just talk about the problems, we've got to fix them, or American farming as we know it will be forever changed. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Now I'll introduce the witnesses. Noah Coppice is an Iowa farmer. He co-owns Coppice Family Farms, Cedar County. He also co-owns Lincoln Way Ag Services, a grain hauling custom pesticide application business. He holds an associate degree in applied sciences and agricultural mechanization from Kirkwood College. We also have John Latham, another fellow Iowan. Mr. Latham is president of Latham High-Tech Seeds, a company his grandparents founded in 1947. To this day, Latham Seed offers corn, soybean, alfalfa, cover crop products. Mr. Latham holds a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture business from Iowa State University. Mr. Caleb Ragland is president of the American Soybean Association. He leads also the Kentucky Livestock Coalition. Caleb and his wife co-own Magnolia Grain and Stock Farm, where they raise soybeans, corn, winter wheat. Mr. Ragland holds a bachelor's degree in business management and economics finance from Bryan College. Mr. Corey Rosenbush, president and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. Mr. Rosenbush previously led the Global Cold Chain Alliance and worked in Indonesia on the USDA's sponsored agricultural development initiative through the Borlaug Institute. Mr. Rowan Bush holds a degree in international development from Harvard and a bachelor's of science degree in agricultural education from Texas A&M. Andy Levine is president and CEO of the American Seed Trade Association, which represents companies involved in plant breeding, seed production, distribution, and related industries. Mr. Levine holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in political science with a minor in economics from the University of Florida. Lastly, we're joined by Dr. Deanna Moss, who serves as Vice President and Director of Competition Policy at the Progressive Policy Institute. Her work includes studying antitrust enforcement and sector regulation, including agriculture. She previously led the American Antitrust Institute and served at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. She has a master's degree from the University of Denver and a PhD from Colorado School of Mines. I thank you all for appearing. Now I would ask you stand and I will swear you in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? They all answered affirmatively. Mr. Koppas, you start out with your testimony, please, and then we'll go to Latham and down the table that way. Proceed.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Noah Koppas. I'm a fifth-generation farmer from Cedar County, Iowa. My wife, Jess, and I farm full-time and run an agriculture business while raising our two teenage kids, Tucker and Ellie, on the farm. We grow commercial corn, seed corn, soybeans, and have a small cow herd. Today, I'm here to represent my farm, my customers, my county, and my fellow members of the Iowa Farm Bureau. I've been involved in my family's row crop farm for my entire life. After college, I spent 12 years working in the local farm equipment dealership before I left to work on our farm full-time. After getting our ag service business established, we have grown into the fertilizer and pesticide sales market and can discuss the challenges we have had and the pressures we see in our row crop farm. The reality in farming today is we're price takers rather than price makers. That's especially true when consolidation limits our options. It's further complicated by a lack of price transparency. With farmers forced to operate at the liberty of the market at the front and back end, I have concerns with our input and equipment supply chains and their ability to manipulate our costs. I recognize that consolidation can offer benefits, including cost efficiencies and technological adoption, which are critical for meeting our global food demand. However, if the market becomes too constricted, it is ultimately the farmer who loses. Fertilizer pricing has become very volatile, with at times wild swings in cost varying as much as 25 to 50% from year to year. We are asked to prepay for fertilizer 3 to 6 months prior to it being applied to the soil and up to 14 months before the crop will be harvested. Many of the contracts are written with a narrow window to get the products applied, or the contract expires and the input is repriced at a higher value, or monthly fees can be applied to extend the contract. Phosphate fertilizer has become a bare minimum usage fertilizer on our farm due to the cost. We have invested significant capital and time trying to find other ways to manage our phosphorus needs, as the cost of this input is at a point of negative return. Following a profitable 22, farmers lost nearly a quarter of their income in just 2 years due to slumping commodity prices and record high input costs. That pain was felt on our farm, and we're feeling it today. In our ag business, we are a startup. We struggle with the supply chain's willingness to sell us product due to our low volume and competition with their bigger customers. In our area, there are several retail locations to buy fertilizer from. However, there are very few wholesale options. Regardless of who I work with, we will be competing with bigger customers, therefore struggle to get access. We use John Deere Operations Center to provide connectivity between our equipment, record data in our fields, and implement strategic placement of seed, fertilizer, and pesticides. John Deere's user agreement mandates they have access to all of the data we record from our equipment and the right to do as they please with it. We utilize a tool called See and Spray to minimize the application of certain herbicides to the weeds the sprayer can see from a highly advanced camera and processing system. This has reduced the use of pesticides by 50 to 80%. This machine comes with a tech fee charged per acre not applied, so we are paying a usage fee on 50 to 80% of the fields that we don't even use the product for. We also have to pay a significant fee to purchase the upgrade on the machine at the beginning. There are other platforms where equipment manufacturers have gone to per acre usage fees that we don't use in our farm. We are under heavy pressure to find safer and environmentally friendly ways to produce our products. How is it that we need to pay for the equipment up front and then pay a usage fee in addition to achieve these goals? We struggle in the seed industry with genetic options. If we want a traded seed for pesticide or disease defense, we can be at the mercy of what one company has bought from another. In effect, we are often getting genetically the same or similar hybrid from multiple companies in a different bag. This situation is prevalent in the soybean side with enlist traits being slow to the marketplace and in rootworm protection with corn. We lack options. The consolidation of the companies has narrowed up the development of new genetics. On our farm, we raise non-GMO and specialty crops when the opportunity aligns with our resources. We're struggling with advancements in seed genetics to support those areas. With only a couple companies owning the majority of the seed production, we're at the mercy of what they choose to focus on. We've been planting the same soybean variety for 5 years now due to lack of competitive options. This limits the resiliency of our farm. It's time to take a look into these areas and assess what bargaining strength the farmer has today. We have no doubt that consolidation will continue, and the challenge for lawmakers in the ag industry will be to balance the efficiency with fairness and resiliency.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Senator Durbin, and the entire committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is John Latham. I'm a third-generation seedsman from Alexander in north central Iowa. My grandfather, Willard Latham, started our business in 1947. I own Latham Quality Incorporated with my wife, Shannon, and my brother, Chris. Our independent seed company sells corn, soybeans, and alfalfa seed under the Latham brand in 7 upper Midwest states. We also operate a soybean production plant and have a corn breeding program. Independent companies are the lifeblood of rural America because we are connected to the farmer customers we serve. Independent seed companies can offer products better suited for specific geographies than the multinationals. Unfortunately, many independent companies are going out of business as these multinational companies have become more powerful and, frankly, predatory. The seed corn industry is 90% controlled by 2 companies, 90%, including their own brands and licensing. Due to this massive consolidation, the price of technology in our seeds has gone up significantly since 2021. These higher seed royalty prices are contributing to higher input costs for farmers and forcing many family farms to close. Prices aren't just increasing for the newest and latest seed technology, but also on older technologies that are going off patent or soon to be off patent. One example is NK603, a glyphosate-resistant corn product, which went off patent in 2022. Farmers are being charged the highest royalties ever for this off-patent technology. More than 90% of biotech-traded corn in the United States is glyphosate-resistant. So farmers are paying billions of dollars for seed royalties on a trait that has been off patent for 3 years. As difficult as it's been for independent companies across America, I believe we have been hit the hardest. Latham started corn breeding in 2020 with the belief that we could create niche corn products that could help our customers fight corn diseases like tar spot. We created products that weren't available from our suppliers, but our very modest corn breeding program was met with anger from our leading big ag provider. After a heated discussion about our corn breeding program in April of 2022, we were told Latham's corn products would have the largest price increase in company history. And it did. Every technology, even older technologies that had gone off patent or were soon to go off patent, were increased. Imagine having to license all your technology from your largest competitor and then having to give your competitor internal company information, including the names and orders of all your customers. Imagine putting your hard-earned money into a breeding program to help your customers, but being forced out by the dominant firms in the industry. Imagine being subjected to restrictive rebate programs that require you to sell near exclusively one company's technology in order to qualify for those rebates. And imagine relying on those rebates to generate any kind of profit. Imagine having your entire year of profits being tied to off-the-record funding that can be taken away at any time by your largest competitor. Imagine being in a business where you don't know your costs of goods before you buy it, and your competitor can raise your costs at any time. Imagine being in a business where the older products that you can't sell increase in price, leaving you with a mountain of expensive inventory and higher prices for farmers. Imagine being in a business where the technology royalty continues to increase even after it goes off patent. Seed prices increase even when commodity prices are low and farmers can't even break even. Imagine being in an industry where it is impossible to capture off-patent genetics because of restrictive licenses and scrambled codes at the seed depository. These are the unfortunate realities of an independent seed company in an industry without competition or oversight. Farmers are paying the price with higher input prices. The lack of new breeding programs and diversity of genetics is a national security risk, where a bioterror attack or disease could threaten the nation's corn supply. I appreciate very much the opportunity to tell our story and the story of other independent seed companies. I do so at great personal risk, but I believe our company's story and the story of independent, family-owned seed companies and the farmer customers that we serve must be told. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It is an honor to join you today to testify on behalf of the American Soybean Association regarding the state of the farm economy and the impacts of rising input costs for farmers. My name is Caleb Ragland. I'm a ninth-generation farmer from Kentucky. I also serve as president of ASA. U.S. agriculture is facing significant challenges, which are illustrated by rapidly plunging margins for farmers. Commodity prices are down nearly 50% from highs experienced just 3 years ago, and farm production costs continue to skyrocket for land, seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and farm machinery, while high interest rates create additional pressure. For soybean farmers, the loss of our largest export market due to trade retaliation by China has made financial problems even worse. We are hopeful that this market will be restored following the meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi. Still, high production costs and market losses mean soybean farmers are expected to face a loss of around $109 an acre for this year's crop. Farmers are paying more than ever to grow their crops. In just 5 years, seed prices have increased by 18%, fertilizer by 37%, pesticides by 25%, machinery by 23%, and interest expense by 37%. Seed is a key cost consideration for farmers. Advancements in seed technology and pesticides have delivered real agronomic benefits, but at an added cost. The importance of seed quality and pesticides to crop production means farmers cannot cut these costs. Fertilizer is a major component of overall production cost. Unlike most other farming inputs, fertilizer relies on global supply chains, which makes the cost unpredictable. This is also a significant input risk that can impact the farmer's ability to have an accurate budget. While agribusiness has faced much consolidation, ASA has not done analysis to provide the committee with an informed position regarding the impact of consolidation on our input cost. However, other factors are contributing to higher input cost. The U.S. imports $33 billion in inputs annually. For high-cost products like fertilizer and pesticides, tariffs create a heavy financial burden. IEEPA tariffs have raised tariff-related input expenses for farmers from 1% to over 12% this year. Inputs also depend on the global market. Many fertilizers and half of the active ingredients for pesticides are imported. Global dynamics like demand shifts and geopolitical issues also impact prices. The high cost of farm production has eroded the financial safety net of soybean farmers and has made it harder to weather trade-related market losses this year. ASA appreciates actions to investigate competition and market dynamics impacting input price increases, like the USDA and DOJ competition partnership and the introduction of Chairman Grassley's Fertilizer Research Act, which ASA supports. If high input costs continue on this path, farm profitability for row crops like soybeans remains dire. As Congress and the administration continue to address the overall cost of farm production, I would like to highlight 3 immediate, achievable opportunities to improve economic conditions for soybean farmers. 1, remove IEEPA tariffs on critical inputs, machinery, and parts, which will immediately lower cost of production for farmers. 2, the 45Z tax credit and proposed RFS volumes will drive investment in soybean processing and biofuel production that needs to be finalized this year. And 3, given the state of the farm economy, targeted farm assistance is desperately needed to offset trade-related losses and negative basis being experienced in many regions. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify on behalf of U.S. soybean farmers regarding the impact of rising input costs on our industry. ASA appreciates the committee seeking to identify opportunities to improve the state of the farm economy. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ragland. Now, Mr. Rosenbusch.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. The Fertilizer Institute is made up of importers, wholesalers, retailers, and manufacturers that serve our American farmers. There are over 200 producers of fertilizers globally, and the U.S. is one of 3 countries in the world that has more than 20 unique companies producing fertilizer. Half of the crop yields in this world are made possible by the use of fertilizer. I grew up in a small rural Texas town of Glen Rose where we raised hogs, and my dad was the FFA advisor. So the highlight of this job is to get out into the real world and visit with growers. I was recently at a farmers co-op meeting, and there were 2 critical conversations that came up: the lack of market demand for their crops and high input costs. Fertilizer prices were at historic lows just a few years ago, followed by record highs. This kind of volatility is a challenge for growers and for the fertilizer industry, because without farmers, there would be no fertilizer industry. We often speak of fertilizer as a single product, but it is actually many different materials, and most of our focus today will be on the 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. They are each different resource-dependent materials with very different markets. The United States does have significant production of nitrogen and phosphate. However, we only have a small amount of production of potash and import almost 98% of our need, 87% of which comes from Canada. The U.S. only accounts for about 7% of total global fertilizer production, and we are a net importer. Overall, 90% of all fertilizer used in this world is used outside of the United States. So if you hear nothing else I say today, please hear this. Fertilizer is a globally traded commodity subject to fierce global competition and supply and demand. To understand that supply and demand, we have to begin with geopolitics. China is the world's largest producer of fertilizers, with about a third of all nitrogen and 40% of phosphate production. They are currently restricting their exports, which are forcing growers to source those tons elsewhere. India, which is the second largest consumer of fertilizers behind China, procure their products centrally through the federal government, which is then heavily subsidized for their farmers. Conflicts in the Middle East have interrupted Egyptian and North African nitrogen operations due to the natural gas supply, which is the feedstock for nitrogen, largely coming from Israel. When Iran's nuclear facilities were destroyed recently, it also seriously disrupted their fertilizer production. Iran is the world's second largest supplier of urea, behind Russia. So speaking of Russia, it's the largest global exporter of fertilizer. And of course, we all know they are still facing sanctions because of the war in Ukraine. Russia also supplied a lot of Europe's natural gas, which resulted in about 70% of Europeans' nitrogen production being curtailed a few years ago. That made Europe the new marginal producer. So you can see we've had significant global supply shortages for fertilizer, but we've also had demand growth. Fertilizer demand is tied to crop demand, and 50% of all the crop nutrients used in the United States is driven by corn. And while commodity prices have been low, we saw 8 million additional planted acres of corn this year, which created even more demand for fertilizer. Many of the largest globally traded agricultural commodities that are experiencing price growth, thus creating high fertilizer demand, are not even grown in the United States, such as canola, coffee, and palm oil. We recognize how challenging and frustrating that this must be for our customer partners at a time when they're experiencing very low prices for the crops that they grow. And that's why we want to be a partner with our growers and with policymakers to develop some solutions. In the interest of time, I'll refer to my written testimony for a detailed description of those policy solutions, but I can summarize it by saying that fertilizer production facilities are very capital intensive, sometimes costing as much as $5 billion for a nitrogen facility or 10 years to develop a potash or phosphate mine. But I do want to be very clear that fertilizer is a globally traded commodity. So while we cannot directly influence prices, we can bolster domestic supply to help mitigate geopolitical risks for our American farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before the hearings today. I'm Andy Levine, President and CEO of the American Seed Trade Association, or better known as ASTA. We were founded in 1883 and are one of the oldest trade organizations in the United States. Its membership consists of nearly 700 companies involved in seed production, distribution, plant breeding, biotechnology, and related industries in North America. Our members produce seed from alfalfa to zucchini, and in production systems from conventional to organic to biotechnology. Every season, farmers choose seeds that have been improved through plant breeding, biotech, and seed treatments. Our members ensure that farmers have access to reliable, resilient seed varieties tailored to local growing conditions, helping them reduce risk and boost crop productivity. Seed development and production begins with advanced breeding and research programs, moves to seed production with practices ranging from large-scale crops to hand-pollinated varieties. Then the seed crop is harvested and concludes with conditioning, treatment, and testing of the seed quality and purity prior to commercial sale. This process can take place in multiple countries as companies rely on different regional climates and leverage multiple growing seasons per year to accelerate the rate of both research and seed production activities. Even with this highly efficient and optimized process, it can take 8 to 10 years and several $1 million just to bring a new variety to market. Plant breeding and seed improvement is an ongoing iterative process that depends on the market, pest and disease evolution, and constant fluctuations. In the case of seed companies developing biotech products or biotech seed, the cost of domestic and international regulatory compliance are significant. A study in 2022 estimates the cost and time to bring a new biotech trait to market at roughly $115 million in over 16 years. In export markets, particularly for a subset of biotech crops, the seed industry faces severe constraints from non-tariff trade barriers, including countries that deliberately use their regulatory system to stymie American seed innovation and exports of American grain products. The seed sector has a long history of delivering seed choice and ensuring seed performance for America's farmers, gardeners, and landscape managers, ensuring the best seed is available to meet the needs of the wide range of environments, soil types, and management practices. International trade and global movement of seed is critical to the U.S. seed industry to efficiently develop and commercialize improved varieties for U.S. farmers. Across all seed varieties, the continued escalation of tariffs on seed poses a unique challenge. For example, a tomato seed can cross 6 or 7 different international borders for research and development to do seed multiplication and clean and package seed before it's sold to a farmer. For each crossing, a tariff may be levied on that same seed, burdening the same seed producer multiple times. Our industry believes there's a path forward to alleviate some of the pressures that both farmers and seed producers currently face. First, we're advocating both domestically and internationally for risk-proportionate, science-based regulatory reform to right-size regulatory compliance processes and the associated costs that impact companies of all sizes. Our advocacy applies to plant breeding innovations like gene editing, as well as biotech crops. Reform is needed to ensure that rapid pace of scientific innovation is not hampered by unjustified regulatory obstacles. Second, and I'll hit this very quickly, but it's most important, is our investment in agricultural research. Not only from the private sector, but from the public sector. Our partners in our land-grant institutions and our research institutions are vital in this process as we go forward in discovering the genetics and base science. And that needs to continue, and they're stressed, as all of you know right now. And that research at the land-grant institution is even more important as we look at our lower acreage crops. Fruits and vegetables, forages, grasses, turf is very important to help in that public-private partnership to bring improved varieties to the marketplace. So in closing, from seed to table, the entire agricultural value chain is navigating pressures from the brunt of inflation and economic uncertainty. We know that farmers are taking this economic challenge head-on to continue feeding, fueling, and clothing the world. Seed producers are weathering it alongside them while working to deliver the high-quality, professionally produced seed U.S. farmers expect season after season. And when farmers buy that bag of seed, they're investing in yield potential, resilience to pests and weather, and the ability to produce more with less. They're investing in better seed for better crops, for better quality of life. Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Now, Dr. Moss.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here today. I am Diana Moss, Director of Competition Policy at the Progressive Policy Institute. Seeds and fertilizers feature highly concentrated markets with only a few firms, high prices, and little choice. Both sectors have been the subject of massive consolidation and strategic business practices. In the late 2010s, the 6 large agricultural biotechs merged to form the Big Three. Today, 2 firms control 72% of the corn seed market and 66% of the soybean market. 3 firms control 83% of the cottonseed market. Fertilizer markets are also highly concentrated. The 4-firm ratio for nitrogen in the U.S. is about 77%, and the 4-firm ratio for potash and phosphates is 100%. These are big numbers. Highly concentrated markets are far more conducive to anti-competitive coordination rather than the hard-nosed competition that lowers prices, lowers licensing fees, tech fees, and royalty rates. So what does high concentration mean for input costs and food prices? To be sure, they are affected by the dynamics of supply and demand, shocks to supply chains such as weather and disease, and U.S. trade policies. But as seed and fertilizer markets have become more concentrated, it is hard to dispute that consolidation and business practices have played a major role. U.S. farmers struggle with the high cost of intermediate inputs such as seeds, pesticides, and fertilizers, which account for almost 40% of their total intermediate production costs. In the last 30 years, the average price farmers paid for genetically modified seed rose by almost 450%, while their commodity prices increased by only 50%. In fertilizers, prices for phosphorus, potash, nitrogen spiked dramatically in 2008, again in 2012, and again in 2022, raising concerns about the potential for collusion amongst global fertilizer producers. All of this puts the squeeze on farmers' margins. The crop farm index for prices farmers receive for their commodities has remained consistently below the index for prices paid by farmers for feed, fuels, seeds, and fertilizers. These supra-competitive input prices initially harm farmers, but they quickly translate into high food prices for consumers who are already grappling with a high cost of living. Consumers spend 13% of their limited budgets on food, the third largest budget item behind housing and transportation. Public concern about food price inflation is at an all-time high. In light of these troubling trends, I believe we need to widen the lens on competition in agricultural inputs. Antitrust's role has been less than exemplary, as concerns over excessive consolidation in ag biotech and potential price fixing in fertilizers has gone largely unpursued. The agencies have also ignored other costs of consolidation, such as delaying entry of generic GM seed, bundled cropping systems that are engineered not to operate with other products and lock out smaller innovators. Antitrust has also ignored the loss of stability and resiliency in supply chains that are created by market power bottlenecks. These issues now transcend traditional competition policy concerns. U.S. farmers should be able to count on fair commodity prices, input costs, and sustainable margins. Consumers should be able to count on low food prices. Both farmers and consumers, most important, should be able to count on having choice in what they buy and who they buy it from. A more coherent policy approach is to strengthen antitrust enforcement. Another approach is to require more or better coordination between the DOJ, the FTC, and USDA, including better data collection to promote price transparency. We might also consider giving USDA authority to intervene if consolidation raises supply chain safety, stability, and resiliency issues. With farmers in the middle of this vortex, we should also be very worried that high concentration costs, prices, and a lack of choice risk the permanent loss of U.S. agricultural productive capacities if farmers hang up their hats and close down their farms. This all means that promoting competition should garner broad bipartisan support. I appreciate the opportunity to appear here today and look forward to your questions.
All of you for staying within the 5 minutes. We're going to have 5-minute rounds of questioning. You'll see members in and out because there's 2 votes on the floor. So we'll take turns questioning. Mr. Rosenbusch, in 2014, the Obama administration discontinued annual reports on the fertilizer industry. Since then, prices have become more and more opaque, making it harder for farmers to know if they're getting a fair deal. My Fertilizer Research Act seeks to fill in these reporting gaps. So could you tell us what measures are being taken to ensure transparency and pricing mechanism so farmers aren't unfairly penalized by last-minute price increases?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question, and we fully support your efforts to provide transparency to growers. We believe them having information about what's going on in the marketplace is very critical. We've been working with your staff, your team, as well as on the House side to reinstate the position at the United States Department of Agriculture that has been vacant for more than 20 years now that was focused on fertilizer pricing and transparency. We believe growers having that independent source at USDA would be of tremendous benefit to growers and to farmers to be able to recognize and understand all of these dynamics that are going on and help them make decisions.
Would that also cover price transparency, that you're talking about?
Yeah, they would also be doing research on prices globally, United States. They would be looking at a variety of different factors. Iowa State also did a research or report on this a couple of years ago, but we believe that position would be helpful long-term.
Okay. Dr. Moss, in your opinion, what types of public reporting could provide the necessary transparency in fertilizer markets for farmers looking for a fair price?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Grassley. I think first and foremost, increasing price reporting to promote transparency would be incredibly helpful, not only for members of the industry, but for organizations like mine, think tanks, and university researchers to be able to do analysis of the markets and the prices that are emerging from highly concentrated markets. Price transparency remains a problem in agricultural inputs, but also in cattle and ranching. So I think that is, in fact, the starting point, is to improve and to promote coherent, efficient price collection databases so that we can have better tools to work with.
For Mr. Latham, Mr. Koppas, major mergers and business transactions over the last decade reduced the big six ag companies to only 4. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Economic Research Service reports that Bayer and Corteva together account for more than half of the U.S. sales of corn, soybean, and cottonseed. What impact does this have on your business? Has there been an impact on the number of corn or soybeans varieties available to farmers?
Yeah, it's been a huge, thank you for the question, Senator. It's been a huge impact on our business, especially in the last 5 years. My brother and I, who's with me today, Chris, we were looking at prices over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, 42% of a bag of seed went to seed royalties. Now 70% of a bag of seed goes to seed royalties. And unfortunately, there's been no new innovation. These are the existing products that we had 5 years ago. There's been no new innovation, no upgrade. There is some new products, but overall, from 42% to 70% has risen prices tremendously. And they did it because commodity prices were good at the time a few years ago, and they said, well, farmers can afford it now. So the prices went up significantly, and now, unfortunately, commodity prices are down, and those prices haven't gone down at all.
Mr. Koppas?
Thanks for the question, Senator Grassley. On our farm, when we purchase seed, I have a relationship I enjoy with a company and a seed person that we work with, and I'm not looking to change that relationship, but we have very little to no price bargaining. The price is the price, and it's consistently gone up every year with some slight changes. If a product doesn't perform, it might be a little cheaper the next year. But we've seen no relief in pricing of our seed commodities.
Okay, Dr. Moss, in your opinion, if a trade owner conditions access in ways that predictably raises rivals' cost of or limits stacking with competing traits, is that a problem, and should it trigger enforcement?
Yes, I do believe that is a problem. One of the biggest issues that we face right now is with the large ag biotech mergers, we now see highly integrated engineered systems of traits development, traded seed, agrochemicals, and now digital farming. It is very, very difficult for smaller innovators, say independent seed companies or independent trade innovators, to penetrate markets, to get into a market, get a foothold, and to compete and effectively distribute their technologies when they are facing an enormous castle wall of a vertically integrated platform. And if companies hold a dominant position in any of those markets, that makes the walls even higher to scale.
Yeah. Senator Durbin, before you go, has a vote started yet? Well, we'll wait and see. If we do, then Senator Lee's going to take over. Go ahead.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. I'd like to say a word and get your reaction on the question of agricultural research. Since the 1930s, U.S. government-funded ag research has helped to boost our farm output by 170%, according to the USDA. Today, most agricultural research in the U.S. is funded by large private sector companies, not the government. Agriculture research funded by the U.S.
Just a
government
minute.
has plummeted in the past 30 years, while Chinese government investment in ag research has risen 8 times, surpassing the U.S. 10 years ago. Today, China is the world's biggest funder of government-funded farm research. Trump administration and the Doge cowboys want the USDA to close and consolidate a federally funded laboratory at the University of Illinois, the Soybean Germplasm Collection, which is a genetic seed bank whose scientists since the 1940s have cured soybean disease, improved soybean yields, and developed new varieties and uses, again creating new markets for farmers. If this lab and its resources are closed or diminished, there is only one other remaining lab. You want to guess where it is? China. Is there anyone on this panel that thinks that that's a good idea? Obviously not. Mr. Latham, that kind of resource and federal research has to be part of your calculation as well when you talk about innovation, is it not?
Yes, I would love to see more investment in ag research from public universities. That'd be very helpful.
Well, I hope you'll all express that to your members of Congress and the people you talk to. Dr. Moss, over the last decade, as you've noted, and others as well, a series of mergers and acquisitions produced big 3 companies that dominate different sectors. In the seed sectors, it's Bayer, Corteva, and Syngenta. Similar trend produced the big 3 in fertilizer, Mosaic, Nutrien, and CF. Should antitrust enforcers at the FTC and Department of Justice have done more to block these mergers that produces the big 3 in seed and fertilizer?
Thank you, Senator Durbin. The answer is an unequivocal yes. These massive mergers, which have completely restructured our seeds and fertilizer industries, are now responsible for high prices, limited choice, and less effective innovation. The major problem with antitrust today, especially in food and agriculture, is a very narrow view that antitrust takes in defining markets. The divestitures that were taken in the Bayer-Monsanto and the Dow-DuPont mergers were very targeted, very small, and there was a lot of deference to giving companies their mergers so that they could innovate better or innovate faster. We now know that high levels of concentration are not necessary to drive innovation, and these mergers on balance produced more harm than good.
Do you believe the FTC and DOJ need new legal tools to stop the anti-competitive practices of these dominant firms, or is it simply a matter of stepping up oversight and enforcement?
I think antitrust plays a very important role given the limited set of tools, but powerful tools that antitrust works with. The consumer welfare standard can approach concerns about high prices, about lower quality, about less innovation. But the bottom line is most of antitrust enforcement just focuses on prices. The kinds of problems we see in food and ag are bottleneck supply chains, loss of resiliency and stability, a delay of generic entry. These are all things that are much, much harder for antitrust to approach in the normal course of a merger investigation or a monopolization investigation, which is why I mentioned we might want to start thinking about giving USDA more authority.
Mr. Rosenbusch, how do you respond to those observations?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. We believe we need a strong domestic fertilizer industry to compete in a global marketplace, especially when you're looking at countries that are often state-owned enterprises producing fertilizers. We think the FTC has taken a close look at this. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 years, the 2 acquisitions in this space were carefully studied by the FTC and reviewed. And we've also seen the USDA 2 years ago go through a competitive analysis of the industry to ensure that we are competing on a global level and global supply and demand are driving it.
Interrupting, but I have just 20 seconds left. The farmers who are buying your product say you're killing them. You've consolidated so they have few choices, take it or leave it choices, and your prices are killing them. When you say you're competitive globally, it doesn't help the farmer in Illinois and Iowa to know that the global market is competitive. How do you respond to that?
We need the farmers to succeed. They need access to fertilizer.
You're killing them with your prices.
And those are all driven by global supply and demand. A lot of these geopolitical events and a reliance on some of that foreign supply coming in is a huge impact on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Latham, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. Where are the main barriers that independent seed companies face when licensing or stacking patented traits in this industry?
Where do I begin? There's a long list. A lot of areas that I could go into. One thing that I think has hurt the industry in general, we have these restrictive rebates that we're under, which really stifle competition because if a new breeding company comes into the market, and if the whole industry is under a rebate, that if they go to that new innovator, they are going to lose their rebate and could fall off a cliff there. So I think that's one thing that's really impacting the whole industry, and there's a whole longer list. I know you have short time.
Now, when we think about intellectual property laws, they're kind of a paradox because on the one hand, the whole point of intellectual property laws is to give someone at least a temporary monopoly in something. But on the other hand, they are pro-competitive to the extent that it fosters innovation. In your view, how does our current intellectual property framework either help or hinder competition or innovation?
Yeah, I think I'm all for patents and intellectual property protection. Obviously, that can create innovation. You have to have that to have innovation. But unfortunately, we see some of these patents where the products get stacked with some new product only to be able to use to extend that patent. And so the patents go from 20 years to many more years. And unfortunately, in 2014, a lot of different corn traits went off patent, and we still don't have any market now for off-patent technology on the corn side of the business. So something needs to fundamentally change.
What about consolidation? When there's consolidation among the major players in the seed industry and among trait owners, how does that influence your research and development strategy internally?
Yeah, unfortunately, on the corn side, and you mentioned the stat too, 90%, and that includes licensing as well as their own brands. But when you have that big of consolidation, it makes it very difficult for any new innovator to get into the market, especially if they want to do traded or just even conventional, it makes it very difficult. So we've seen since 2016, when the committee met last, we've seen massive consolidation, we've seen less innovation, and we've seen much higher prices, unfortunately, for our farmer customers.
Those two things naturally lead one to another, right? I mean, the diminished competition pretty much always is going to result in higher prices, or at least diminished quality, sometimes both.
Absolutely.
And there's no exception to that here. And the more consolidation you see, regardless of what the cause of that is, but if let's suppose if it's prompted by an excessive federal regulatory footprint, that can do it. But regardless of what the cause is, if there are fewer competitors, there is often less competition. And always when you see less competition, that causes other problems. Mr. Kappas, have you noticed reduced competition or consolidation among local dealers or fewer independent options over time?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the independent seed companies, when somebody retires, moves on, oftentimes that doesn't get replaced by a younger person or a new person taking on that business. That dealership just goes away oftentimes.
Okay. No, that's helpful. And Mr. Ragland, how does dependence on imported potash and imported nitrogen affect the U.S. growers' resilience in planting?
Well, as we mentioned in our testimony, it's a global market, requires a lot of planning ahead. There's global forces at work, and we have a very limited number of options where we can purchase. And the less competition, oftentimes the higher the prices are. And we have some data we provided that shows that since the Ukraine war in particular, prices spiked up drastically when that started. They came back down, but they have plateaued at a much higher cost than they were before.
Than they were before the war?
Yes.
They never fully retreated?
No, not anywhere close. And that has had a major impact across all of production agriculture.
Right. somewhat reminiscent of what happened during COVID. And
Yes.
finally, Mr. Rosenbusch, how do dealer incentive programs work in practice, and do they inadvertently limit fair competition?
Thank you for that question, Senator Lee. On the fertilizer side, we do not have dealer incentive practices. That's more of a crop protection practice.
Okay. Thank you. My time has expired. Senator Klobuchar is up next.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Lee, and thank you to the chairman and ranking member for holding this hearing. I'm used to seeing many of you. I'm ranking member, as you know, on Ag, especially you, Mr. Ragland. I know you've testified before. I also note that Gail Slater is here, the head of antitrust for the Justice Department, who has had widespread support on this committee. So one of my farmers, soybean farmer, actually described this situation right now as a perfect storm of ugly. He talked about the input costs, some of which are caused by consolidation that we've been so well talking about today, talking about what's happening with labor and the fact that we are missing some ag workers right now, and I think there's another way this could be handled. Talked about the tariffs and IEPA, and I note that with soybeans, and I'm glad that there's discussions going on, but even if that somehow that market came back immediately, as you know, Mr. Ragland, which it won't do, it's still a horror for our farmers in terms of half of their market is China, but the other half is other countries, nearly all of which are also subject to these tariffs. And so I just think that if you look at this as a whole, and not just with soybeans, but for other crops and what's happening with machine parts, as you point out, that this is a really hard thing that's going on right now. And I would like to see a reversal of these tariffs. I think that would be the quickest way to solve many of these problems. But let's start with market consolidation, and I'll start with you, Mr. Latham. What would it mean to you to have real competition in the seed market?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It would mean everything to us. I think if you had no restrictive rebates, the rebates are very punitive for independent companies. If you had broad licensing, I think you could see a flood of new breeding companies into the market, which is vastly needed. I think with gene editing, there's a whole host of new technologies that we could take advantage of. But right now, when you've got a couple different companies that are controlling the whole market, it makes it very difficult for a company to invest in new technology.
Thank you. That's helpful. Ms. Moss, quickly, how does consolidation affect the resiliency of the ag system?
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for the question. Consolidation is now responsible in many food and ag supply chains, as well as in healthcare, for creating enormous market power bottlenecks, where you have powerful companies, oligopolies, or dominant firms controlling prices paid to producers, but then also controlling prices that consumers have to pay in the grocery store. These bottlenecks are really susceptible to instability. If a supply chain is hit by some sort of exogenous shock like weather or disease, as we saw with COVID, then there are very few other competitors to step in, and so supply chains go down. And that is not only a national security issue, but a health and human safety issue.
And just a quick answer on this, because I called you as a witness many times when I chaired the antitrust subcommittee, now working with Senator Blackburn on the tech subcommittee. Would reform to our antitrust laws with either the Calera bill or the bill that Senator Grassley and I have introduced, which is just beyond specific industries. Would that be helpful when it comes to these issues?
Absolutely, yes. Anything to strengthen, modernize, and clarify our laws.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ragland, could you talk about the market for soybeans outside of China and what's happening with some of that as well? Because I think all the focus gets on China, but there's a lot of other countries.
Well, those markets outside of China are roughly half of our exports. China's the other half of our exports. And those markets are fairly strong, but they're only a limited amount of the demand for our product. And that gaping hole that is left by the lack of the China involvement is very detrimental on our prices.
And
right
is
now.
the tariffs under IEPA affecting all of these markets?
Yes.
Yes. That's what so in my state, about 60% of the soybeans goes to, are exported, which is pretty high. Do you want to talk about just in general, the export market, which we cherish, and not just for soybeans, but corn and other things, why that's such an integral part of American agriculture, because we're not going to eat everything we make.
Yes, soybeans are the largest ag export from this country, and it's so vital to the economy, not just of agriculture, but of rural America. And that gaping hole that is left by the lack of the China involvement right now is going to trickle down to our rural communities and rural economies and have a very detrimental impact, because rural America is agriculture is the backbone of rural
Right,
America.
it's 20, but I think we make about 20% more than we use here. And that is what allows us to keep going, and why this is such, as my farmer called it, a perfect storm of ugly. Thank you.
Thanks.
On competition and price transparency. Go ahead, Senator
Thank
Britt.
you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing on this critical and timely issue. Agriculture is the bedrock of Alabama's economy. So 1 in 5 jobs in our state are tied to the agriculture industry. I am so proud of our farmers and what they do, knowing that they feed and clothe people, not just coast to coast, but across the world. You know, ranking in the top states in the country, Alabama does when it comes to poultry, when it comes to catfish, peanuts, cotton. And we are really proud of the work that our farmers do. And Alabama farmers are acutely familiar, though, with the impact of skyrocketing input cost and what that's done on the bottom line. When we look at like the last 4 years, knowing that input costs, have gone up across the board, but that our agriculture community has been hit the hardest. And just knowing that farmers are experiencing record-breaking yields, but yet losing hundreds of dollars an acre. And so when you try to square these things up, you know that we have to do something. In fact, based on historical yields, every major row crop from peanuts to cotton to soybeans will be produced at a loss in 2025. And so food security is national security. We say that all the time. But we also know that our agriculture community and our farmers are the bedrock of our rural communities. And if farmers are not thriving, our rural communities are not either. And so there is so much at stake in making sure that we get this right. There are real concerns with the limited number of companies that provide seed, fertilizer, and crop protection products to our farmers, but that consolidation doesn't stop with inputs. We also see the same consolidation in packers, in equipment manufacturers, and in farms to a certain extent. Crop input suppliers, manufacturers, and farmers have generally been forced to grow larger to achieve economies of scale and increase productivity while attempting to decrease costs. I want to start with Mr. Levine. It is clear that the primary driver of consolidation across the industry is a desire to lower cost. We've seen the consolidation, but instead of prices going down for our farmers, we've actually seen the opposite. Can you speak to some of the outside pressures that have prevented the industry from achieving true economies of scale?
Senator Britt, thank you for that question very much. As we've continue to innovate in the agriculture industry, and especially in the seed side, the cost of the regulatory compliance, especially in the GM or the biotech arena, has increased dramatically. And working with the grain industry to ensure that the markets that we export to, or our farmers export to, are open and have transparent processes to review those new products that come to market has been extreme. We've seen that in China. And we share the chairman's comments that we hope to see good news come out of that this week, because we were supposed to have those approvals in phase 1 deal with China, and now we don't have those. So the regulatory costs have become extremely high and challenging as we try to bring new products to market. But I think we've got several regulations in place that are out of date. We have a very strong safety record with the production of new varieties and biotech traits over the last 30 years under the coordinated framework that has not evolved. We've not changed that process to make it more efficient for new companies to come into the marketplace, as well as new products. And it's become harder and less science-based. The same with new varieties. As we look at, as John mentioned, gene editing as a tool, how is FDA, EPA, and USDA going to manage those policies coming into the marketplace? If they're too burdensome, it will be restricted to large companies that can afford the regulatory process.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to stay on that theme. Look, I've been encouraged by many of the things that Administrator Zeldin has done and the things he is looking at doing in the future. My question, Mr. Rosenbusch, is in what ways do federal regulations impact your members' companies' ability to bring innovation and affordable products to market?
Thank you, Senator Britt, for that outstanding question, because it is a huge impact on our manufacturers that are wanting to innovate and bring new products or even grow supply domestically as we look to expand mining operations or build a new ammonia plant. You've got environmental permitting that needs to be streamlined. You also have new products that it's difficult to know where they get regulated. And so as you think about some biostimulant products that we're looking at, or even tools that help nitrogen be more efficient, getting through the process at EPA, or ensuring that it's regulated to the state level, which is where most fertilizer is regulated, is critical to giving farmers additional tools, especially in these difficult market times.
Thank you so much. Thank
Senator
you, Mr. Chairman.
Booker.
Mr. Chairman, as always, I'm grateful for the deference. I want to thank all the witnesses. Your testimony was very, I would say, frankly, invaluable. Mr. Latham, I'd like to start perhaps with a question for you. Despite 2 court orders in 2020 and 24 banning dicamba use because of its damage to neighboring farms, causing millions of acres of crop loss, the Trump EPA, headed by a former industry lobbyist, recently proposed to reauthorize the herbicide. What impact would it have on your rural community and the farmers that you serve if EPA again approves dicamba for over-the-top use?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Senator Booker. I frankly believe, we've seen enough issues that I think the technology is good and is needed, because we need to be able to fight against weed resistance, but yet over-the-top causes so many issues that I don't think that it should be approved for over-the-top use.
That's great. And because if it was, what would happen to the communities if it was again approved for over-the-top use?
Unfortunately, we've seen volatilization, we've seen drift into other crops and vineyards and different things. So it's become an issue in rural areas.
So knowing what you just stated about how harmful it is and would be as a practical manner, if it's once again approved, would your seed company have any discretion in whether or not to sell dicamba-tolerant seeds?
Unfortunately, probably with the rebates, we would probably have to sell it to be able to make our rebates, unfortunately.
That seems stunning to me, that something that should not be used in this way, but just to stay competitive in the market, you would have to sell it. Does that strike you as indicative of free market capitalism?
It does not, and I don't like it either. I think we should be able to sell what our customers want and the best value for them.
Yeah, and it really strikes me as not just an assault on free market capitalism, but something almost akin to a authoritarian system where you're told what you have to do, what you have to plant, what chemicals you have to use. And that's something that is very un-American to me. Would you agree?
I agree.
Dr. Moss, I'm going to soon be introducing legislation to not only not only place a moratorium on any new big ag mergers, but also require the DOJ to do a look back at the biggest mergers over the last 20 years in the food and agricultural sectors to unwind any mergers that the DOJ finds caused material harm to competition or to farmers or to workers or consumers. Dr. Moss, do you think that this type of look back would be beneficial? And if it was conducted, do you expect that many of the previously approved mergers would be found to have caused material harm?
Thank you, Senator Booker, for that really good question. Yes, I think the value of retrospective studies for consummated mergers is really critical and invaluable. We in the economics community have have agitated and urged and encouraged enforcers to spend more time doing look-backs. Of course, they're resource intensive, and I know there is a number of pieces of legislation that would fund those types of efforts. I think at the stage we are at in food and ag with high levels of concentration and demonstrable evidence of high prices, and slower innovation, the look-backs would be really important. Ultimately, it's really up to the agencies to enforce a very strong structural presumption against highly concentrative mergers. Unfortunately, we're still not there. And in the Dow-DuPont and the Bayer-Monsanto mergers, those structural presumptions for high concentration did not get a lot of attention, and now we're paying the price for that.
I mean, we consumers are paying the price for it, but our farmers are paying a tremendous price as this concentration of these very powerful companies who now, frankly, thanks to Citizens United, pour millions and millions of dollars advocating for their mergers down here in Washington. But the real people being harmed are consumers, but frankly, are our farmers themselves. And that brings up my a final question, and I'm hoping, Noah, I really appreciated your testimony, but given the extreme consolidation within America's agricultural industry, do you have any flexibility to purchase seeds or fertilizers from firms other than the Big Four?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Booker. We have retail locations that serve the needs for the fertilizer. We don't have the on-farm storage to handle some of those products. It's unclear often who the wholesale or manufacturer is for that product, but you can tell when you go from retail to retail to retail and the price is the same, that we're coming from the same place.
Thank you. As the chairman knows, I spent a lot of time in Iowa and met a lot of farmers from across the political spectrum. This gentleman here moved me when he said 5 generations on his farm, and I still remember sitting with farmers who still had that original deed going back to the 1800s, and the pride of every generation being able to not just make a living, but raise their families and strengthen their communities and provide for American hunger and demand. And suddenly the economics that work for 5 generations just barely add up. There's a nobility, sir, about what you do. For America, you are great patriots, and I'm really hoping to work with and I know how much you care about American farmers, sir, so I'm really hoping we can find some bipartisan work to do together and keep people like Noah and his family at the center of our thought process, because we can do something. This is not inevitable. This is un-American. This is a perversion of the free market. If we give them a chance to compete, I promise you that family will have another 5 generations of success on their farm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing. I don't know that many people across the country have an understanding of how American agriculture touches not only their everyday lives, but their security. And I think this hearing is so important, whether they live in Iowa or Florida's heartland, which is where I am from, Plant City, Florida, the winter strawberry capital of the world. Proud to hail from there, and also now represent Florida as their newest U.S. senator. But agriculture is so important to our cities and states, indeed our nation. And if there is one takeaway from everything that we're hearing and what every witness, I think, would agree with, is that our food supply chain, its success, its security is a matter of national security. COVID-19 really put this into focus for us as a country. A long time, we never really thought about food, where it came from, many people. But then suddenly we were facing shortages in certainly many areas, PPE, other products, and we had to start looking to China. So the same country that was responsible for COVID, we then had to import products from them to protect Americans. We faced medicinal shortages. Where did we have to look? China. I mean, there were so many places when it came down to a crisis point that we had to go back to our foreign adversaries, and when we determined we had weaknesses in our supply chain. And there is risk that comes with relying on a foreign country for critical supplies. Corporations over time have focused more and more on lowering costs by offshoring, relying on foreign inputs, minimizing their inventories. And we're now seeing how that affected jobs here in America, certainly. And there's interest in making sure we have fair markets both domestically and internationally, but we can't lose focus of the affects of that on our domestic supply and security and America's interests. And it took that one pressure test in 2020 to see how vulnerable we are now. So one event can jeopardize our access to PPE, formula for infants, essential medicine. So imagine how important it is for American agriculture to prosper and be resilient so that we have a food supply that withstands foreign interference. Florida is a big part of that. Not many people think of agriculture when they think of Florida. They think of flamingos, beaches, weather, all kinds of things. But they don't think of agriculture. But it is truly the lifeblood of our nation's agriculture. So much of the supply chain that goes to supporting growth in our farms comes from Florida. When it comes to phosphate and the natural resources we need to put food on the table, Florida leads the way. And truly, Florida feeds the world in that sense. It's in the best interest of American farmers and our state and our country to pursue a balanced approach. That is one that unleashes the full potential of American mineral production and American products that support agriculture and our food supply, that at the same time ensuring we have a fair global market supply. There is no question that we must fortify our domestic food supply chain. And that starts with shoring up American products that are necessary to sustain a critical base of domestic food production. The industry that feeds us, that is life-sustaining, is much bigger than any economic impact statistic, and we should take every step we can to make it more resilient. Securing the supply chain is a matter of national security, and if American agriculture stumbles, if fertilizer production is overburdened and neglected, our adversaries profit. We will become more and more reliant on those adversaries. I hope to avoid all conflicts. I think that should be every American's interest. But should a conflict occur, we will start weakened at the gate if we rely on our adversaries for food. We don't need the art of war to tell us that. That is common sense. I want to start with and ask a former national FFA president, which I have great respect for, being from Plant City and from FFA, Mr. Rosenbusch, thank you for being here. Is phosphate essential to growing food?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. And Plant City has had more national FFA officers than any other city in the United States, so congratulations on that.
I didn't know that. You just taught me
Yes,
something.
you do.
Go
you
Plant
do.
City.
Yeah, phosphate is one of the critical minerals. You cannot grow half the world's food on this planet without phosphate. And of course, as you know, Florida is the center of that phosphate production. And we have tremendous opportunities in this country to expand if we can remove some of the regulatory burden around mining and manufacturing.
And ahead of the United States in terms of natural reserves, China, Russia. So if, in fact, we do not support and ensure that we have domestic production, we will become more and more reliant on China and Russia. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And Senator, China has restricted those exports, and they produce 40% of phosphates, which is one of the nutrients that's really challenging growers right now. And frankly speaking, one of the reasons they're doing so is to invest in lithium phosphate battery production. And so they definitely have policies that are impacting our growers here.
And at the same time, if I might just finish this one question, Mr. Chairman, at the same time that we're making sure policies are supporting American growers and American products that support those growers, in order to keep input costs low for our farmers, we also have to ensure there's a fair global market. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. I missed some of the testimony, but I have reviewed it and saw some of it. I just want to start with Mr. Koppas and Mr. Latham. And I also want to say to us, much of what the farm community is facing is a result of policies that have been allowed to take place by this Congress. And we all revere the hard work of our farmers, but we've got to do some work of our own and address these policies. Both of you talked about the high input cost, and what I understand is that it used to be about $10 a bushel a few years ago. It's now 11 or 12. The selling price used to be 13 or 14 a bushel, and it's now about 10 bucks a bushel. Is that right? So you're losing money on every bushel, right? And of course, you lost markets. We sold 12 billion to China. How many bushels of soybeans have you sold, either of you, to China this year?
Well, when I drop it off, I'm not sure exactly where it's headed, but to my knowledge, we haven't sold very many.
None. The market is absolutely destroyed, and that is directly a result of the tariffs. So you have more patience than I do about this tariff, but this is killing these guys, and we've got to acknowledge that and get their markets back. There is discussion right now about taking some of that tariff money and sending it to farmers. And God knows I support getting some aid to farmers. But let me ask you this question. Do the soybean and corn farmers in Iowa, would they prefer to work hard and sell their product to a market or get a government handout?
Thank you for the question. We don't want to live by the government's hand. We're fine being the tip of the sword if we can correct the greater problems and have a better long-term future. Okay, we're okay with that.
But you want to be self-reliant, you want to sell, you want to produce, you want to work hard, you don't want a government handout, right?
We would like to have fair
I am
trade.
totally with you. You've got some supplemental income in your state on agricultural land. It's wind turbines, right? Those help the farmers?
We have wind turbines in our state. It's a discussion amongst different landowners, whether it's a positive or negative thing.
Okay, but the farmer makes the decision. If we, as a Congress, take away the help for wind, that takes away some income for farmers. Is that correct or not?
On the farmland that has wind turbines, that would be correct.
Right. And you know, what I know, we have dairy. That's our big farming in Vermont. Farmers are good at a lot of things, but one of the things they're astonishing at is fixing things. A headlight goes wrong on their tractor, they fix it, right? Something goes wrong. You don't have the right to repair your equipment, and it costs a ton. And sometimes you lose production time because your tractor's down and you got to wait for the dealer to come out. I am introducing today a right to repair. So if you buy a tractor, what do they cost, $250,000 now? You can fix it. You can turn the screw or do whatever it is to get the software you need. What's your view on right to repair?
Thank you for the question. The farmer needs an option to either repair himself or go to an independent repair shop if he doesn't have a relationship with his dealership.
Well, I agree with that.
We need that technology.
And I want to tell you something. I just came from Vermont. Our farmers across the country, it's Vermont, it's Iowa, you guys all work hard, okay? And you have to face all kinds of things. They're completely beyond your control. The things we've been talking about here, the tariffs, the high input prices, the concentration, so you can't do seeds on your own. Those are political decisions. Vermont right now is facing a crisis, our worst drought in 55 years, and our dairy farmers don't have the hay crop and the feed crop. You've got a lot of soybeans that are spilling over. Would you have any problem with the USDA buying your soybeans to help us get through the winter and feed our feed our animals in Vermont? One farmer helping another?
I would have no problem with that, Senator.
In fact, you'd like it, right? You'd be selling your surplus and helping our Vermont dairy farmers who are just getting crushed by the drought that's really killed them. Well, I thank you about that. You know, we've got the phosphate, as you mentioned, that's everywhere. 14% increase in price in Vermont for our farmers. They have no control over that. We mostly import it from Canada. Is that an input cost that is also going up in Iowa?
It is. On our farm, we've minimized the use of phosphate down to an absolute necessity where we have to have it. It's simply a negative return.
Any thoughts on what I understand is going to be the administration position that we should start importing cattle from Argentina? That can help out?
Thank you for the question. On my farm, we have 10 cows. It's a small part of our farm. What I can tell you is I'm not a fan of the government dramatically changing the price of something we have. I've got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old that are 2 cows each into starting their cow herd. And it's a tough day for them to realize the calves they have to sell to go buy more replacement heifers today are worth quite a bit less than they were 2 days ago when they're ready to go to market next week with them. So that's a tough lesson. But there again, we're not a fan of the government making those large swings for us.
Well, I'm with you. Mr. Chairman, you are our best farmer in the committee, probably in Congress. You are patient with the president, and I respect you for that. But I just want to say that I don't know him like you do, but the tariffs are really hurting us in Vermont, my dairy farmers. And this drought, which they don't complain about, it's just something they've got to deal with. We'd love to be able to get some of your surplus grain to help our farmers who lost their crops. So they can't control the weather, they can't control a lot of things, but we can control some policies that'll make it possible for another 5 generations to keep going. So I really appreciate this hearing, and I appreciate your leadership on ag issues, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I hope
Thank you.
know, Senator Welch, I've consistently expressed my views to the president's cabinet about the impact of tariffs. I hear that all the time from Iowans, farmers and non-farmers alike, and I've expressed my views to them. You bet. I'm going to continue to ask questions. I don't think anybody's coming back, and just as soon as I get called for this last vote, this will be the end of the meeting unless somebody comes in that didn't get a first round. So I'm going to ask Mr. Latham, across corn and soybeans today, are there still contractual or technical barriers that keep you from offering a seed with a competitor's trait stacked alongside another? Could you describe the specific clauses and data obligations?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. Yes, there are restrictive rebates that we fall under as an independent seed company, and it happens a lot to farmers as well. But if we use an alternative, and if we fall below, let's say it's usually 85 or 90%, and then we could fall off basically a cliff and could lose our whole profitability for the year.
And Mr. Compass, farmers report rebate clawbacks, delayed allocations, and audit threats after trying rival products and services. Could you give us some details of the recent incidents where a supplier or retailer used rebate leverage or allocation delays to punish switching?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Oftentimes, our pricing structure on our farm is the more we buy, the cheaper it gets. I haven't personally experienced a rebate callback, but it is very clear when we're purchasing products that the more we buy, the cheaper the product gets, driving us down into we need to try and stack that to stay profitable, limits our options.
Mr. Levine, your organization says on its website that your membership includes 85% of all private U.S. seed companies operating in the United States, both big and small. Is there a disagreement among your members regarding antitrust and intellectual property issues, laws, and enforcement?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. We're pretty consistent with respect to intellectual property laws. It's a key pillar for our strategic plan, and it feels like that's where our companies make investments as technology continues to improve and we bring more products to farmers. We also believe very strongly that our members have their own strategies for how they implement intellectual property practices. We don't judge those by the companies. That's not our position as an association. So whether they choose patents or PVPs or licensing or just trade secrets, those are all tools that all innovators in the U.S. have available to them.
Yeah. Doctor, this question would be to Moss, Rosenbach, and Levine. Only one of the 4 largest companies controlling the ag market is U.S. owned. In your opinion, does this represent any national security risk to our country?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to chime in on that. Having a concentrated market with just a few firms operating in that market or a dominant firm absolutely represents national security risks, especially in food and agriculture. We've talked about market power bottlenecks, where producers and consumers are at the behest of a very powerful company in terms of prices paid for commodities and prices paid for food. So we have to be extra vigilant in food and agriculture to enforce our antitrust laws to ensure that we have competitive markets and the ability for smaller innovative entrants to get in and to have a go of it.
Yeah. Do the other two, if you want to add to that or express your own view, I invite the two of you to do that as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. When we look at this, we obviously have antitrust respect for the U.S. laws and for our own antitrust policies with the association. So we don't have a position with respect to how contracts are done or pricing is done, anything along those lines from the member standpoint. We want very strong intellectual property rights. We know that the American market is one of the most competitive in the United States, and we would like to continue that process. This is where the innovation in our industry is done, and that's why we're the leaders globally. So we would like to continue that as we go forward, and hopefully that competition continues to stay strong.
You have anything to add, Mr. Rosenbusch?
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. I would just say that on the fertilizer side, most of the U.S. producers are U.S. owned.
Okay. For you, Mr. Rosenbusch, when a single foreign supplier dominates an essential input and Commerce and ITC impose duties that may choke off that source, what specific safeguards would the Fertilizer Institute support to prevent a de facto domestic monopoly and keep farmers supplied?
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, for that question. The trade cases that you're referring to there are complex and have been adjudicated through the International Trade Commission. At the Fertilizer Institute, we have both of those members on both sides of that case. So a wise man once told me, when you have two members on both sides of the issue, go with the member. And so we don't have an official policy on any of those trade remedy cases. I will tell you that there were many factors when that case came forward in 2020 that impacted the market and impacted the supply. A lot of those tons ended up being filled by Saudi Arabia and other countries.
We have some statements here from people that want to get into the record. Statements and letters from several groups, including the Iowa Corn Growers Association. I'm going to ask unanimous consent that those statements be put in. There's nobody here to object. Dr. Moss, in plain English, where's the line between licensing that speeds innovation and licensing that walls off rivals, especially for stacked straights? Do you support narrowly tailored measures similar to the fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory agreements? If so, why?
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. So I think two things quickly in response to that question. Antitrust does a very difficult dance with intellectual property law. Our intellectual property laws are extremely important for spurring incentives to engage in R&D and to innovate products. But as we've seen in the pharmaceutical industry, there can absolutely be trouble ahead when firms use intellectual property rights to shape or to control how competition develops. We've seen that with product hopping and generic seeds, where generics have been kept out because of small changes in patents and another 20 years of patent protection. So that's the first answer. The second is, if we do get into the business of standard setting organizations where the large biotech companies will be needing to figure out what the standards are, it will be a very complex and difficult process given how much trade stacking there is. And determining what is a fair price for a license, of course, would be even more complex, and that will require a good deal of government oversight, and I would expect it would generate an enormous amount of controversy.
My last question will be to Mr. Levine and Dr. Moss. I want to understand why generic insect-resistant traits haven't materialized despite patent expiration. I understand that there does not appear to be a single generic insect-resistant trait available to growers, notwithstanding frameworks touted as solutions. Why is this the case?
My first response would be, again, the ag biotech industry has borrowed a page from pharmaceuticals, filing for new patents based on very minor modifications, which then locks in another 20 years of patent protection and the ability to charge monopoly prices. The FTC currently has a case looking into loyalty discounts in pesticides. That is another way to lock farmers into cropping systems and limit the ability of farmers to switch. Lack of interoperability exacerbates this problem. So we are nowhere near on top of these types of abuses of intellectual property that are really designed to stifle and to control competition.
Yeah. Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we look at it, just to reiterate, we're not in the practice of collecting what the practices of the members are or how they license or charge fees. It's against American antitrust law, so I'll make comment from the respect that we support products coming to market. This is much more difficult than other chemicals or pharmaceuticals or things along those lines that come to the marketplace after that expiration. You're looking at a lot of products where it's maybe the BT product, but you're also looking for stacks of other products with that. And then also newer varieties as they come along. Is somebody going to want to stack that on a 20-year-old variety that's off patent, or do they want a new variety that is more resistant and has disease resistance in it? So the plant breeding process and the trait development process is an evolving process as we go along, and it's not just static. We're not planting the same seed varieties we did 20 years ago. We're trying to bring that newest product to the farmer. The ASTA has been involved in driving the ag accord to try to give that platform for generics coming to the marketplace. But it's been a challenge, and it's one that we need to continue to work with Congress and work with the administration, EPA, and USDA to try to provide that pathway for companies that choose to go to the generic traits and varieties.
Before I adjourn, I thank all of you for your contribution to this debate, and you can keep, if you got anything you didn't get a chance to say, we'll take it in writing. Senator Durbin and I, as well as the entire committee, would like to thank each witness for taking the time to share their knowledge and expertise. Written questions can be submitted for the record for 1 week from today, and I'll ask the witnesses to answer and return the questions to the committee within 2 weeks after you receive them. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.